Hey everybody, and welcome back to the stream. Wanted to catch up with you again, and I actually had a little bit more time this afternoon, so I wanted to talk about how we resolved some of the pipeline problems we were having during the last stream, and then figure we have a little bit more time. Let's continue the work. Let's actually get the first draft of this site deployed to an Azure web app, and that way we can actually do what we're supposed to here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what was happening before, and so I'm going to go ahead and get right into it, and go ahead here and show my screen. There we are. Oh, thank you for the following, Omar. That was great. I was happy to see that. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is go ahead here and switch over to my webcam, my screen here, and we'll continue streaming. All right, and here we go. So once again, mentioning that this stream is being allowed by my employer, Excella, who is fantastic. I'm currently between client gigs right now, and so I'm working on getting some stuff set up and working out loud or working on some utilities for us. And so as I do that, I decided to stream it. And I love being an employer that allows for that kind of flexibility and that kind of ability to express yourself and to do some of these things at work. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, when we left off last time, we were having a bit of a problem. And the problem we were having, I will return to, go ahead and return to this. The problem that we were having, if you recall, is that we were having some problems on our build paths, or on our in our build here. So what was happening is that we were, upon pushing our image, so we are building a container and we are pushing a container to a container registry that we created, and then we're eventually, hopefully in this session, going to push that to an Azure web app through a release process. So it looks like at this point an image does not exist locally with the tag. We were getting this error that was very strange. An image does not exist locally with the tag. And it looks like the tag is sort of a secret value in the name of the repo, and we were trying to figure out what the heck is that all about. Well, I figured it out, and I was excited enough that I wanted to come back and share that with you, and I actually wrote up a blog post on it too, because I'll probably forget it at some point in the future. So to understand a little bit about what happened, we're going to go ahead and pull up our repository here, and then we'll look at our file. So what happened with our Azure Pipelines file is that we had a bit of a discrepancy in our tasks. So we, rather than using the build and push task, we decided to use two separate tasks, and that's so that we can only push the container upon the completion when it's actually a commit against the master branch. We don't want to do we don't want to build and push a container for every single PR that happens, for example. So in this case, say not now. In this case, we had a build step that passed in the Docker file and the repository and the container registry. Actually, it didn't pass in the container registry, and that was the problem. So what was happening down here is I looked up the code, and in fact, we can go to the code here for the repository here. We'll go, it was github.com/Azure Microsoft Azure Pipelines tasks. So this is the repository for the tasks for Microsoft Pipelines. And I went to the tasks folder here, and I went to Docker v2, which is what we were using. And when I started to look into the Docker build and Docker publish tasks, I noticed, and I won't go through the exact lines here, but there's a function that will get the qualified names for the images and how they should be pushed, and that, depending on whether you pass in the container registry key or not, will either append the container key to the front of that path, which is necessary, or it will not. And so what was happening here in the case of my pipeline is that this push step does have the container registry, and so that means it's going to look for a certain label. But my build or certain image name, but my build step for the container did not have the container registry. So it was actually getting built with an entirely different name, and hence getting that weird error about there's no about the no label, an image does not exist locally with the tag. And so what happened is I was able to add that container registry step to my build file. It produced the correct name, and now we've actually got a build there that successfully pushed the image to the container registry. So that's what the successful output looks like there. And so what I'm going to do here is just give a quick look at the actual portal here. So we'll go into my Conma repo container registry, and I can see within Azure here that I have the repository section here on the left-hand side, and now we can see the container has been pushed. So we can see the tag here, the build tag, which is 1173. So that was the latest, that's the one of the tags that we're pushing. We could push an additional tag that says released or something like that, or the date, or however we wanted to format it, and we could add a number of other tags as well. But in this case, I think a running tag of the latest build number should be sufficient for what we are trying to do in this case. So let's go ahead and continue our journey. So next, now that we've got an actual container registry here with a container image, we're going to need a web app to actually push that to. And so since we've got an app here, I'm going to go ahead and go into my resource group here, and I'm going to add an additional resource. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to publish a web app for containers. I think we can do web app for containers. So I'm going to go ahead and create this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create that web app in this Conma repo group here. We'll give it that URL for now. All right, so Conma repo is available at azurewebsites.net. I hope no one steals it from me on the stream while we're going. We're actually, rather than publishing code to this website, we are going to publish a Docker container. And what we're saying is that region, I'll make it East US 2 again. So we have to create a service plan. So we need a Linux plan, since it's going to be a Linux container. So right now we're going to do that. I'm going to see if we can. Okay, so the SKU and size is there. I want to see if maybe I can adjust that size, but we'll figure that out in a little bit. Okay, so we'll use the plan. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong. I see. This is for another application. So I'm going to go ahead and create new. Call it Conma repo container plan. All right, now we have the option to change the size. We shouldn't really need a whole lot of muscle here for this VM, and so I'm probably going to look for a more basic container if I can. So we'll see some additional options. So I'm looking at, okay, let's see, compute units. This is probably more in line with what I'm looking for, an S1 type VM. Let's see here what we have for the dev and test. So we could go with a B1, which is probably more what we'd be looking for. So we can do custom domains and scale with that. That's pretty cool. I don't know that we can do deployment slots. I'm looking at that. I don't think that we can do deployment slots with this. Let's see. Staging slots is available for the P1 V2. Okay, so I think then, given what we're looking at here and the estimated cost, I'm probably going to drop it down to the S1 for now. I do want to be able to do those staging slots because I think it's important and that we have that going on. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit apply there. And the reason I mention the staging slots is because we'll use those as part of our release pipeline. All right, so we've got the container plan, we've got a standard. All right, now we need to go on and pick our Docker options. So here in this case, we can see the options are we can either do a single container or a quick start. I think we're going to say it's going to be a single container, not a Docker compose. We're only running one container, at least for now, at this point. The image source is going to be an Azure container registry, the one that we created previously. So we can select our registry there. It automatically finds the image that we're looking for. We can select 1173 for now because we're actually going to manually push those images from Azure DevOps, so I'm not so concerned about this particular tag. We don't have to worry about the startup command because that's already within the Docker file and the container. So we'll go ahead and we'll choose monitoring. we cannot currently do application insights, which is interesting to me. I would love to be able to do application insights on a container instance like this, but that is okay. We will have to figure out a way to do that separately. I'm not going to put any tags on it for now because it's in a resource group that we understand. We'll go ahead and get that created. So what we should see now is this should get created, and then that specific tag that we mentioned should be deployed. And then what we will see is that it should not work, because remember, we had stored in the past episode some environment variables in our secret.json file for local development. And since we had stored our secrets there, we're going to have to add those as environment variables to this web application before it can function. And so I want to be able to do that. And so what we're going to do is allow that to finish. And in the interim, I'm going to pull up that secrets.json file. I'm going to go here and right click and choose manage user secrets. All right, we see well, isn't that interesting? An error occurred while initializing the frame's content. I've never seen that before. Try it again. All right, there we are. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, and again, these aren't like super secret, so I'm not like, worried about showing you the contents of the secrets.json file, but I'm going to try and get in some better habits. So I will probably pop up my secret screen when I do that. And just just so that you're aware, that's going to look like this. All right. So when that secret screen happens, that's what you're going to see, and that just means I'm doing something secret behind the scenes, or it's got some sensitive information that I don't necessarily want to show to folks. And I'll try to indicate before I do that. Okay, so hopefully, let's see how our resource is going. Okay, our deployment is complete. And we're now at the website. We should, since that's been deployed, actually be able to see what's happening. We'll see an error, right? That's what we expect. But we can see here's the website. Okay, so it is there, and there is an error processing our request. But we can see that it's been deployed. That's the name of our website, so that is great. That means we'll be able to get that deployed. Now, we're going to go ahead and go to the configuration for this website. Now the configuration here is where we're going to add those environment variables that we were putting in secret.json. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new setting here for, and I may get the format wrong, so it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to create, I want to say it is, let's look here at our configuration file. So the items that we have are going to be Azure AD :domain and Azure AD :tenant and Azure AD :client ID. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can't do that. I believe the website by default actually reads from environment variables, so we'll see if that works. Azure AD tenant, the IDs are capital I, lowercase d, okay. Azure AD, so we'll do Azure AD tenant. Let's see. AD.tenant ID. Let's see if it knows how to translate that. Azure AD.client ID. Oh, sorry, that's not the value. We'll create that. New application setting. And lastly, we need Azure AD.domain. Now, I'm almost positive I'm doing that wrong, so we're going to go ahead and look that up, because it's always good to look things up when you don't know what's going on. So, .NET Core config. No matter how many times I do this, I find myself looking up stuff like this all the time. So it's not just dad brain. It's not just being a new dad. I promise that this stuff is good to look up. You don't have to keep it all in your head. .NET Core nested configuration environment variables. Let's try that. The confusion of ASP.NET configuration with environment variables. Environment variables with ASP.NET Core _ prefix get overridden by your app settings.json. Well, hey, thanks, Georgie. And so we're going to go ahead and check that out. So add an environment variable of, sure. Okay. If you create an environment variable and try loading, you'll see it gets precedent over the app setting.json. So we should be able to say ASP.NET Core. Gotcha. So we'll come back here. We'll name our variable ASP.NET Core Azure AD client ID. And we'll go ahead and update the others accordingly. ASP.NET Core Azure AD domain. ASP.NET Core Azure AD tenant ID. All right, I'm going to go ahead and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that on the secret view real quick. I'll be right back while I populate those with the values from my secrets.json file. One moment. Okay, I am back. And so now that we've added the secrets to these environment variables and we've used the ASP.NET Core, I guess a convention for that, at least we think we have, we're going to go ahead and hit save on that, and that should restart our container. Saving, change the application settings, extremes, restart your application. Are you sure you want to continue? All right, so it's going to update those web applications, or those web settings. It's going to restart the container. All right, it says successfully updated the web application settings. So let's go back up to our overview here. We'll click on that link. Still an error. So, okay, let's see how this goes. So still an error. All right. That is okay. So I think part of that is that we need to allow this as a callback URL in this case. So what we're going to do is going to come back to the application that we had registered in Azure Active Directory. So remember that when we created this application in the first episode, a comma repo.web entry was created here, and we can see we have redirect URIs that were created. I'm going to click into that section, and we can see localhost with the port sign in OIDC was added. That's helpful. So we're going to add a URL here, make sure that we allow that, and we'll also add that same path to the end of that. And I'm going to go ahead and add, an HTTP one as well. Must start with HTTPS. Okay, so it does. All right, we'll go ahead and save that. Okay, so now we've gone ahead and we've got that redirect URL in place. I think that might be part of it. And if that doesn't work, we'll go to the console of the container and we'll see what's going on. So we've got that there. We're going to go ahead and go back and restart that web application. And we'll see perhaps it's the values that we had provided. We'll go ahead and see. Successfully restarted. I love how fast that is because starting the container is just so darn fast. All right, go ahead and refresh. Let's see. Okay, so we're still getting that error, right? So next up, we're going to look in the console for the container, which I'm trying to remember where exactly that is. Perhaps under container settings. All right, so we can see the container registry, the web. Okay, we don't have continuous deployment set, and that's fine. We should be able to click refresh here and see some of the logs. Interesting. Okay, so there don't appear to be any logs loading. Look into that. All right, so it is possible this convention is incorrect. Let me see here. I'm trying to see if I can get to a spot where I can look at the logs. I guess so. What I could do here. Oh, here's the logs. Okay. So let's see. What do we see here? Logging is not enabled for this container. Please use this to enable logging to see container logs here. Well, that sounds like the kind of thing I definitely want to do. All right, let's go ahead and see when your application fails to start, or you want to check the logging from your app, check the Docker logs in the log files directory. You can access the SCM site. Okay, so this wants us to go to the Kudu site, and we'll go ahead and do that. So under the advanced tools here for development tools, we can click on that, and we're going to go ahead and go to that. Now you'll notice what it's going to do is it's going to show us, it's going to take us to the name of our website. Instead of the name of our website .azurewebsites.net, it'll be the name of our website .scm.azuresites.azurewebsites.net, and that gives us this great little behind the scenes bit of tooling that we can utilize to help these things out. So let's go ahead and look at this. All right. So what we're doing is we're going to try and look at these logs here. We've got deployment logs. I think we want log stream. I think we'll want to open the event stream here. Okay, looks like that didn't quite do what I wanted it to. So I'm going to go ahead and open Google Chrome. I'm going to go ahead and try and go back to the same spot. I'll probably have to log in for a moment. That's okay. All right, so we're back here. Looks like Chrome does a slightly better job of the log stream, and that's all right. So now it's starting the live log stream. So let's go ahead now and try to go to that website here. We see the error. Let's go ahead and... All right, so we've refreshed the page, so hopefully we see some sort of streaming in here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I didn't have to turn anything on. I may have had to turn something on to see that first. Always jumping ahead. Enable application logging under app service logs. Okay, well that's clearly what I need to do. Application logging under app service logs. App service detects the change and restarts the container. Okay, so this has to be done within Azure. So let's go and look at that. App service logs. I see here that we have app service logs are currently off. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. We'll set a quota. 35 megs seems fine. Retention period of 1 day. We don't need anything too much here. I'm going to go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and look at the log stream here as well. It looks like that might be even easier. So now we can see the container is initialized. Okay, so we do see that. That's great. Let's go ahead and refresh that. So we see the error again. Perhaps we'll get some additional output. Or not. All right. So what we can do here, though, one of the things we wanted to check was the environment variables and what's actually being put out there for our consumption. So what we want to look here is we can look at environment. We should be able to see. All right, I see those values are populated. What we don't see is whether. Okay, what we don't see there is whether the application is actually picking up on those. So we know that they're there. What we're not actually seeing is what that is the case of what we're trying to do here. So let's look and see if we can spit that out somehow. In our startup, we've got the options here. We could probably add some sort of logging of the configuration, and so trying to decide where I would want to do that. Now let's try setting the log settings. Right now we have the default information warning. So let's go ahead and see if we can modify those and get some more verbose logging. That will confirm a few things for us. So that'll confirm with these logging levels, that will actually confirm two things. One, that we'll get more logging information out of it, and it'll confirm whether or not these log levels actually make sense and are being picked up by the application with that convention that we're using. So let's go ahead here. We will come back. I'm going to go ahead to our configuration again. All right, and so if this is correct, if this approach is correct, we are going to be looking at ASP.NET Core underscore logging underscore. Let me jump back to this to make sure I'm doing this correct. Okay. All right, and this is from 2018. I'm going to double check and just make sure that I've got another source on this. Make sure that I'm doing this correctly. Again, I don't ever mind looking up stuff from other folks who have been very nice to put this together. So it looks like environment variable, I see, okay. So we would do config. What's happened to config from the environment variable? We prepend config to the environment variable name. Using this prefix allows us to specify it as a filter. Okay, so this is one with the custom filter being done. So that's not quite what I want to do, though it's not a bad idea. Okay, so the official docs might be a good spot to look for that, don't you think? That would be pretty funny. All right. Let's go ahead and look at how this goes. Okay, so let's look at the default builder, chain configuration provider. The default configuration loads environment variables and command line arguments prefixed with .NET and ASP.NET Core. The .NET and ASP.NET Core prefixes are used by ASP.NET Core for host and app configuration, but not for user configuration. On Azure App Service, select New Application Settings. For more information to Azure Apps, override app configuration. Okay, let's look at that. App settings permit you to set environment variables for the app. Environment variables can be consumed when an app setting is created. Environment variables configuration provider. Prefix with .NET using the environment variables. Okay, so this is so environment variables prefix with .NET, and it will add forwarded headers middleware there. So it looks like we may want to use .NET. So the prefix .NET is stripped when the configuration key value pairs are loaded. So it looks like that's what we want to do here. Okay. So let's go ahead and go back and check our site here. We'll rename those from ASP.NET Core to .NET. Let's just give that a shot. Looks like that might be the accepted convention currently, and that's totally fine. All right. And by all means, I mention this throughout while I'm streaming, but if you've got a question or you've done this before and you know what's going on there, then by all means show that. Now I'm going to go ahead and edit these variables again. I'm just going to go put up that secret window so that we can make sure that I don't show you another variable. Cool. All right, here we go. All right, so I've renamed those variables there from ASP.NET Core to .NET. Let's go ahead and we'll see if that works. We'll go ahead and update that. It's going to update those settings. It'll restart the container, and then perhaps we'll actually get somewhere with this. That would be lovely. And again, part of this is I've got some old knowledge lying around, right? I've got some. It's been a while since I've done this specific part of it, so you gotta knock off the rust. You gotta be unafraid to screw up for a bit and look at some things. All right, so we know that's not quite working, and so what we want to do then here, just to see if it's us or if it's something else, is I want to go ahead and try and see if we can mess with the log file verbosity, and so that would be. Here, let's see. So I might actually need to add environment variables in my config. I don't know if I've done that. I assume it's going to have that by default. Create default builder args. Let's double check that. It is possible that I will have to look at that myself. Let's see. Webbuilder.use startup. Okay, so in the host builder. I'm doing it in the wrong spot anyway. Okay. No wait, sorry, I'm getting all turned around. Right, we're looking at this in the host builder. Silly me. So if I go into the host builder with the args here, create host builder, right, with default builder here. Oh, add environment variables. I'm so silly. Boy, nothing makes you feel rusty like having to do this kind of stuff from scratch and not having the muscle memory. It's good to be able to knock it off again. All right, so we actually want to go into our startup. Do oh no, that's the configuration of the services. Oof, my goodness. I'm gonna have to Google this, aren't I? Well, this is humbling. That's okay. Let's go ahead and Google it. I knew it's where. Okay, so create a new, generate the following code. Default builder, create default builder, provides. Okay, provides default configuration, so it does use that by default. Okay, so it's good. I don't have to add it, which is good. The double underscore is supported by all platforms. It's automatically replaced. Okay, so we want to use the double underscore for each level, it looks like. Position, title, set. Okay. Alright, double checking. Alright, so it looks like we use the double underscore for both sets. So default configuration, prefix with .NET and ASP.NET Core, host and app configuration. Okay. So let's give that a shot then. So in our pipe, back to our application here, we want to try to modify the logging levels. So I believe in this case, that would end up being so that would be, if we're looking at our logging here, our app settings here, it would be .NET underscore logging double underscore log level double underscore default and then Microsoft. So let's go ahead and apply that. Logging log level. So .NET logging log level default, and we'll have that be verbose. Let's just do debug. All right, let's change that, and we'll do the same here. We'll copy that name. Logging, it says logging log level default, and then logging log level Microsoft. We'll set that to debug as well. This should at least pick up on some additional debugging here. Application settings and connection strings will restart the application. We okay with that? Yep, we're okay with that. Okay. Great, so now we've updated the app settings here, and we should be able to go to that container. Let's go see what's going on here. It'll still error, of course, but now hopefully we'll get some additional logs and we'll get that confirmation that that format is working correctly. Let's go ahead and look at the log stream. Hey, I see some, let's see, all right, let's see if we get to some more logs here. If we initialize successfully. Oh, so we do see some logs here. That's great. Okay, so it looks like that format is indeed working. That's great. So initiating warm-up request. Okay. Diagnostics, unable to obtain configuration from PII is hidden. Okay, I see the identity model PII. That's great. Okay, so that's in the exception handler middleware, which is coming from, it is coming from the authentication. Okay, so it looks like it's coming from the authentication. It's unable to obtain the configuration from. So let's double check and see what our configuration is doing here. Make sure that I've got it right, and I'll double check it on my end here. I'll check that out. Okay, let's go back to our configuration. And as I mentioned before in the last video, this stuff's always a little bit of a headache, but then once you get it set up, you're good to go pretty much, so the little bit of a headache that it is at first really ends up being fine in the end. Okay, so we are utilizing the double underscores here, and that's good, and double underscores there as well. I'm gonna bring this window over. I'm gonna pop this out here real quick, and I'm going to delete those bookmarks. I'm going to pop this window out into its own window here. And I'm going to bring that over and just double check that briefly against my configuration values that I know to be true. So give me one moment here and I will be right back, or I'll be here in case you want to ask questions while I'm doing it. But I'm just going to do some things off screen real quick just to double check. Alright, so I am just confirming my environment variables. I'm looking at my secrets.json file. First thing I'm going to check is the tenant ID. Okay, that is correct. So check the client ID. Okay, and we'll check the domain. Okay. So I'm going to try one more thing real quick. Now that we've got that, I'm going to put that ASP.NET Core prefix rather than the .NET prefix. See if that has any kind of effect on things. Just doing that real quick, adding that prefix back. All right, now we should be able to bring this window back here. Okay. Bring the window back. So we've changed those prefixes again. We're going ahead now and we're going to see if we can save that. Sure, it'll restart our container and that's fine. And it's possible that I'm totally missing that this is okay or not, but my understanding is that I should be able to supply these this way. So we'll see. All right, it's restarted. Let's go to our log stream here. Okay, so it's loaded successfully. Okay, now we see it's trying to send the warm-up request again. All right, we see we've got some issues there. So let's go ahead and try to get to it one more time. From our repo. All right, we see the error. Do we see another error in the log stream here? Looks like we do. So it's still having the issue. Unable to obtain configuration from PII is hidden. So it's possible this is an issue with our Azure AD integration, I'm realizing. So a couple things that it could be. I'll look at this. Authentication. Interesting. So this is partly what we'll have to deal with, I think, is anonymous access is currently enabled. We're going to definitely prompt them for a login. On this app service. The app provider is Azure Active Directory. Well, this makes a whole lot of sense, doesn't it? So, common repo, authentication, authorization. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and say management mode is going to be Express. The current Active Directory is here. We're going to select an existing AD app. That's what we created previously. Well, this makes a lot of sense. No Azure Directory app found. Oh, sorry. Yes. So we will create a new AD app. Well, now, hold on a second. I'm going to go back. I'm going to edit. I'm going to leave this page. Because I'm looking at the application that we have here. We had registered previously an application in Azure AD. And my understanding is we should be able to have this work as we'd expect. So let's look at authentication here. In this app here, we have the web redirect. We have access tokens and ID tokens. We are only allowing it for our domain. Okay, this seems to be fine. Interesting. Integration assistant. Let's see. We'll try it out. Integration. We have a web app. Evaluate my web app. Okay. Configure a redirect URI for a web app. By the way, I love that this even exists, that there's a troubleshooting thing that gets this advanced with what we're dealing with. So that's pretty neat that that actually is a thing that happens. Very nice about that. So let's look at that. So if you want single sign-out, configure a logout URL. That's fine. I'm not so worried about that right now. Discourage configurations. Do not configure a credential. Action is required, and do not configure an application ID URL. Okay. Let's double check and go there. Okay, I'm not so worried about that because that was created by default. Okay, so interesting. All right, so as I've done before, as I mentioned, I have an application that is working correctly with Azure Active Directory, and so I want to I'm going to check that out and see if I've got anything here under the authentication or things like that for this particular website. So this is another website I've made before that I tend to reference because I've already gotten it done here before. So in this case, okay, so app service authentication is turned on here and it's configured here, and it is advanced. Okay, so we're using that client ID there. Okay, so I think we'll want to do that. All right, let's go ahead and do that. We will go ahead and in our application change the authentication for that. All right. And turn that on. Now, the thing I'm surprised that I can't look at the existing AD apps because I feel like I totally have that AD app available. Okay. Anyway, that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and do advanced then. The client ID, which I'm going to go ahead and shoot URL PowerShell get Azure account, or by browsing to your directory from the management portal. I'm going to go ahead and use that other application setting because it'll be issued from the same spot. So I'm going to go ahead and check that. I see. Okay. Try that out. I'm going to paste the client ID. I'm going to move this off my screen real quick. And actually, I'm just going to go to the secret. I'm going to paste in that client ID that I have, and we'll check that. So give me one moment here. All right, and we're back. So what I've done here is I have gone ahead and configured advanced AD settings. So I added the client ID in there, and I also had to use a URL for that here. So for example, I had to add a callback URL, and I just realized I didn't quite do that correctly. So I'm going to go ahead, and you know what? You can see this. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and add that. And we want to add this so that it is conmarepo.azurewebsite.net, HTTPS, of course. So we'll go ahead and say OK. We'll save those. We'll save those settings. All right. Now we're going to go ahead. I'm going to go back and restart this website. I might not even need to restart it. I might be being superstitious, and that's OK. We'll go to our log streaming again. All right, log stream is here. I'll go ahead and clear it so we just only get the new stuff. Let's go ahead and turn that on. See what we're getting. It's taking a second here. Still getting an error, that's okay. See if we see anything meaningful on the log stream. Okay. Nothing on the log stream. That's interesting. Okay. Let's try and back here again. So nothing on the log stream this time. Oh, there we go. What are we still getting? Unable to retrieve document. Unable to retrieve. PI is hidden. Okay, so unable to retrieve document. Let's go ahead and see For local debugging, enable the development environments. Let's set environment to development, restarting the app. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and do that temporarily, because we obviously are in a debug kind of a situation here. So I'm going to go ahead in our configuration. I'm going to add that environment, development. Obviously, this is like a don't try this at home thing, but since we have no actual content in our app or anything like that right now, I'm content to do that. All right, so we've got that environment variable changed. I'm going to clear out my notifications here. We've got that environment variable is changed. We'll go back to our log streaming. Okay, so the last thing we see here is from, okay, 1850. Okay, let's go ahead and restart. Okay, unable to configuration, so PI is hidden. All right, I'd really like to see what is going on there. By default, we do not include any potential PII in our exceptions. If you need to see the full information present in exceptions, please set identity model event source dot show PII to true. Identity model dot logging flag, which indicates whether or not PII is false. Start by false. Okay, so I think I might be able to do that via an environment variable. Logging .NET Core logging config show PII. I'm double checking whether that can actually do this through a configuration variable where they have to make a code change, which would be unfortunate. Let's double check here, see if this from the identity server is repo is any helpful here. Okay, so you have to do that. It doesn't look like you can override it from configuration. So let's see, in configure services. Okay, let's try this. Let's see if we can find that there. Okay. So we'll do configure services. What they're saying here is source. Options. Okay, that's interesting. And as always, when I'm stuck on these things, I invite anybody to jump in and help out. This is not a, it doesn't, as much as I'm content to suffer through it myself, it doesn't have to be me suffering through it. So I'm going to go ahead here, and I think my next step is to see if I can find that show PII option again. So how do I get to that identity model show PII piece? The identity model event source. Okay, but unable to continue. Okay. Well, that's no good. The security certificate is expired. It expired on January 24th. In this case, I will accept the risk. Configure services endpoint in your startup class. Okay. Page 6 by GDPR. Configure services endpoint in your startup class and add the following line of code. Sure, let's give it a shot. Why not? Configure services endpoint in your startup class, or configure services endpoints. All right, we'll go ahead and import that. Sure, why not? Okay. Interesting. So, is that just a singleton of class event-based logger to log different events? All right, we'll try it out. Why not? Mostly as long as this builds and I can get it out there, then great. Okay, we will go ahead and push that. I'm going to go ahead and push that. I'm also going to make sure that we have something that tells us to clean that up. So make sure I add a task for that. Clean up, remove, show PII option. Make sure I have a task. If I don't have a task, I run the risk of forgetting it. Okay. Great. So once we've got that there, now we've pushed that, we should have a pipeline running. Right. So we see here, this build here. It's great. Okay, so that's running, it's doing its thing. I wonder what build number that's going to be. Either way, when that gets done, we should be able to see it. It's already building, it should be pretty quickly. So that's going to get done. It's going to tag a new thing, and I'm going to come into my Azure here again. And since we're being deployed from a container, I'm going to have to go and tell it another tag to use here, I believe. Right now we sort of specify that it was being hard coded to tag 1173. So when this build finishes and that's pushed, I think I'm going to need to go ahead and change that as well. Okay, almost done. Almost done. All right, so it is pushed. Build of 1174. Okay, so it's just one more. Should be able to refresh this. I should be able to see build 1174 here. .1174 is there. I'm going to go ahead and save that. At which point we should see something getting pulled. Okay, we'll refresh that. Okay, great. So I think, has that been deployed? 57? Okay, looks like it's been deployed to try to send the warm-up request. It didn't work, so that's fine. But let's look at the errors that we get in our log here. There we go. Let's see. Ah, well, there we are. So it looks like we have not changed our environment variables. That is what I thought it might be, but it's nice to finally have the confirmation. So what is currently not being overridden correctly? Okay. Specify tenant identifier. Okay, so in this case it is the tenant. So this is great. We now have a path forward. Oh man, debugging. It's so much fun. So we have a path forward. So now what we should be able to do is look at what is going on with these configurations. I can never just make it easy, can I? Okay, so it should be core Azure AD domain. Now it looks like that's interesting because I would have expected that override to work. So let's go ahead, figure out why that's not working. So we have our values here at core. Oh, okay. So I wonder. So we'll go ahead now that we've got that advanced logging on, we'll change that to .NET like the others. So I'm going to go back to secret again. We'll change those variable names one more time, and I'll be right back. All right, so I've got those variables renamed again to .NET, so it matches those logging levels, which we knew it did pick up on. We did see that the additional verbose logging there. So when we change that to debug. So let's go ahead and save those. So we've got that latest version. We've got the development environment enabled. We've got the PII enabled. So we should definitely still see if something's going wrong here. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and enable. So still not working here, right? Still not getting those environment variables changed. So that makes a lot of sense here. Let's see if it's cache control. Interesting. Or we've got some caching by default here. Can I break that? No. Okay. So that's definitely the problem. The problem is definitely that those environment variables are not being set. So Azure AD environment variables. Let me see if there's something wrong, or if there's maybe something that's not allowing for that. No, we know the CLI example. Well, I have to admit, this is a little bit disheartening, just because we have not gotten as far today as I would like, but that is all right. So .NET Core Azure AD auth environment variables. Okay, Azure AD, tenant ID, client ID. Okay. Launch settings. Let's look for environment here just to see if I've got. Okay. All right, so something is strange about the way I'm overriding those. I'm sure that it's one of those things where when I get off this stream, I'm going to say, oh, I can't believe I did that. So the section is Azure AD, and the actual value is tenant ID, client ID, domain. Let's see if there's capitalization issues. Azure AD is capitalized in both, in all three. Double underscores between, capitalized. Okay, interesting. So it looks like I'm not certain what the issue could be here with these environment variables. I believe I'm overriding them correctly. I believe that I've got values within them, that I know. So we know that those should be at least defined correctly. Now the question is, why are they not overriding? So back to the old Google machine, .NET Core. Double check one more time. Okay, that's what I was missing. There we go. Thank you very much, Luke, for that setup. So the issue here that I'm doing, the issue that I'm running into, is to not think of it as app configuration, but rather host configuration. So what's happening is, on web host, those environment variables are read first for the host config, and the prefix is stripped off. Then the app settings.json provided configuration is read. So the issue there, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So prefix, don't use ASP.NET Core prefix for app configurations for host config. Let the app use the unprefixed or a custom prefix that you declare That way, app settings JSON goes first, and the environment variable can override it. Okay. All right, that's interesting. Okay, so I think that's at least helpful to know. So I'm definitely doing it wrong, which is good. We surmised as much. So I'm going to try and figure that out. In the interim, I think I can try to potentially not prefix those variables. So I'm going to drop off real quick and try and see if I can just remove those variables overall. 1 second. All right, so I'm back and I've removed that .NET Core prefix, and I'm going to go ahead and try and save those and see if they'll be read as app settings, since those are in my app settings.json file. I'm wondering if that's part of the problem. I wonder if I can still override them here, given that I have now have them in this format rather than putting that .NET prefix there for host configurations. So I'm going to we'll see what we're doing here. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my log. Log stream, and if this still isn't working, then I'm going to have to throw my hands up and say, you know what, sometimes you bang your head on simple things, and that happens, and today that has been twice. First I banged my head on the container pushing to the registry, and this will be another round for today. But you know what, that is okay, and sometimes it's necessary. So I'm going to refresh the website. Hey, this is better. This is better. Okay, great. So now what we're seeing is, sorry, the reply URL specified in the request does not match the reply URLs configured for the application. That is awesome. That's what I want to see. That means we're at least getting some environment variables there. And so I think my mistake there, it looks like, at least so far, was that I needed to remove that .NET prefix because I was accidentally specifying a host configuration rather than an environment or an application configuration. So that makes a lot of sense to me in retrospect. I don't know how I would have found that out ahead of time, other than just going through this pain once or twice. So let's go ahead and look then at our reply URLs. Let's go ahead and look at Authentication here. So we can see here, we don't have a client secret. Perhaps we should generate one just to do that, but that's okay. So right now we've got comma repo to Azure, callback, okay. Let's go ahead and go back to our registered applications in Azure Active Directory. Because I'm wondering if that's really what we should have done, and we can turn that back off. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to Authentication. Let's look at, we had, just want to double check the URL here. Okay, right, that is the right site. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I've got that correct. We'll paste it in there. So far, so good. It's okay, it's the same thing. We're not going to generate client certificate or a client secret right now. I don't think we need that right now. Or we've already got it, actually, is more likely than not. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we are going to look for the callback URL there for that site here. Go to the authentication again for our web app. It's on. We're not going to allow anonymous requests. We're going to log in with Azure Active Directory all the time. So when the request is not authenticated, we want every user to be authenticated in this site. So we'll go ahead and see if we can So here we can actually select that comma-repo.web now. That's great. I think that's what we want. So we've got Azure Express existing app. Let's go ahead and save that. That should wire everything up. Okay, now we're going to go back. And you know, at this point I'm superstitious. Who knows if this is going to work or not. But let's go ahead and restart that container. We'll look at our logs. And after that, I'm going to have to say that's it for today, regardless of whether this works or not, which is always the worst. That is the most difficult thing when we want to do something and we can't quite get to it. I'm glad we got past at least one hurdle today, though. So I'm going to go ahead and all right. So we've got our logs here. Let's go back and go to our website. And with any luck, we'll actually see a sign-in page. No such luck, and that is okay. So the request ID. So let's go ahead and enable those advanced diagnostics. And we'll go ahead and attempt to go to that site. Okay. So the good news is I think we'll be able to figure this out. We've got some diagnostics. We know we're not hitting the site because we're hitting the Azure AD stuff. So I think that the good news is we should be able to track this down and troubleshoot it. And so, you know, I'm upset to have to leave it there, but I know that we're going to pick up next time. We're going to get this app ready to go in Azure AD, and then we're going to go ahead and, you know, make this thing work and start getting some actual features in place. So this has been a very I think a very helpful. So this has been I think a very helpful journey so far. It's been good for me to shake some of the cobwebs off, good for me to remember some of the differences in .NET Core. You know, it's funny to think that I taught a whole workshop about this not too long ago. And so, you know, getting things set up and getting integrated with Azure AD and doing all that kind of stuff, it's definitely humbling. But the first time around, you know, it's good to kind of see how these pieces fit together, what some of the pitfalls are, and where we might want to go from there. And so, you know what, next time we're going to pick this up, we're going to get the Azure AD stuff integrated, we're going to get that Azure release pipeline set up, and then we're going to start iterating and building some features. So I hope you'll continue to tune in with us, and I hope you will continue to celebrate everything around you, and I hope that you will remember that Black Lives Matter and that we are all important on this journey towards equality and making sure that the world is a better place for everybody. And so in that spirit, I just want to say I love you all, and hopefully we will talk to you soon. All right, happy coding. Bye-bye.